Long before the unified empire, in the turbulent crucible of the Warring States period, roughly from the 5th to the 3rd century BCE, the very first fragments of what would one day become the Great Wall of China began to scar the ancient earth. Imagine a land fractured, a mosaic of competing kingdoms, each vying for supremacy, each fearing annihilation. To the north, the wild, untamed steppes stretched endlessly, home to nomadic tribes whose swift cavalry raids were a constant, chilling threat. To the south, west, and east, rival states sharpened their blades, their ambitions casting long shadows across the fertile plains. It was out of this crucible of fear and ambition that the earliest walls rose, not as a single grand design, but as desperate, localized defenses. The state of Chu, for instance, in the southern reaches, built its own walls as early as the 7th century BCE, long before the true Warring States era, though these were primarily earthen ramparts to delineate borders and protect against neighboring states rather than northern nomads. Further north, the states of Qin, Zhao, and Yan, the very powers that would later play pivotal roles in the unification of China, found themselves on the front lines of this existential struggle against the Xiongnu and other nomadic peoples. Their response was pragmatic, immediate. Build. These early walls were not the grand, stone-faced marvels we often envision today. Many were simply rammed earth, layers of soil, gravel, and sometimes straw, compacted tightly between wooden frames. Imagine the rhythmic thud of mallets against the earth, day after day, year after year, as countless laborers, farmers, and conscripts toiled under the fierce sun or biting wind. These humble fortifications would have risen perhaps a few meters high, crowned with a simple wooden palisade or watchtowers at intervals, their purpose clear: to slow an invading force, to provide a vantage point for defenders, and to offer a measure of psychological reassurance to the settled agricultural communities they protected. The state of Qi, nestled on the eastern coast, also constructed extensive defensive lines, known as the Great Wall of Qi, primarily to defend against incursions from the powerful state of Chu to its south. This particular wall, built around the 6th century BCE, was one of the earliest and most substantial of these pre-imperial fortifications, stretching for hundreds of kilometers and utilizing a mix of rammed earth and stone where local materials allowed. It speaks to the pervasive sense of insecurity that gripped the land, where even internal borders required such monumental efforts to secure. What truly set these early walls apart was their disunity. Each kingdom built its own, often overlapping or running parallel to another, like the jagged edges of broken pottery. There was no overarching strategy, no shared vision beyond immediate survival. The state of Zhao, for example, built a northern wall to fend off the Xiongnu, while simultaneously erecting southern walls to protect against Qin and Wei. It was a landscape of fragmented defenses, a testament to the deep mistrust and constant warfare that defined the era. Historians still debate the precise effectiveness of these early, fragmented walls against the nomadic cavalry. While they undoubtedly slowed incursions and provided defensive strongpoints, the highly mobile Xiongnu often found ways around them, or simply breached weaker sections. Perhaps their greatest value lay not in outright stopping an invasion, but in acting as a deterrent, forcing raiders to expend more effort and time, thereby reducing the frequency and scale of attacks. They also served as vital communication lines, allowing watchmen to signal the approach of danger across vast distances, giving local populations precious time to seek refuge. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the beacon towers that accompanied these walls. These were not just watchtowers. They were part of an ingenious early warning system. By lighting fires at night or sending up smoke signals during the day, Guards could transmit messages across hundreds of miles in a remarkably short time. Imagine the flickering lights dancing across the dark landscape, a silent language of alarm, carrying news of approaching danger from the distant frontier to the heart of a kingdom. This network was crucial, transforming static defenses into a dynamic, responsive shield. Consider the sheer human cost, too. These were not projects undertaken by machines, but by the sweat and toil of countless individuals. Families were separated, fields left untended, all for the sake of these earthen ramparts. The building of walls became an integral part of the social fabric, a collective burden, and a collective act of survival. It instilled a deep-seated sense of communal defense, a shared purpose in the face of external threats. As the Warring States period drew to a close, one state began to assert its dominance, Qin. Led by the ambitious King Zheng, who would later become Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, Qin systematically conquered its rivals, one by one. The very walls that had once divided the land now became obsolete, symbols of a fractured past. Yet, the experience of building and defending these walls had imprinted a profound idea upon the collective consciousness. The power of a continuous barrier against the northern menace. The unification of China under the Qin Dynasty in 221 BCE marked a pivotal moment. With the land finally consolidated, the new emperor looked north, to the persistent threat of the Xiongnu. He saw not a collection of disparate walls, but an opportunity to forge them into a single, formidable defense. The vision was grand, unprecedented, to connect the existing fragments, to extend them into new territories, and to create a continuous barrier that would stretch for thousands of li, protecting the heartland of his newly unified empire. This was not merely a military endeavor. It was an act of profound symbolic significance. It declared the permanence of the empire, its intention to define its borders, and its determination to defend its people. The old walls, born of fear and division, would be reborn under a new banner, transformed into a symbol of unity and imperial might. The stage was set for the true birth of the Great Wall, not as a collection of separate defenses, but as a single, monumental undertaking. The scattered fragments of the Warring States era were about to be woven into a tapestry of stone and earth, a testament to human ambition and resilience that would endure for millennia. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. The whispers carried on the wind, tales of a fragmented land, a tapestry of warring states, each vying for dominance. For centuries, the Zhou Dynasty had held a nominal sway, a fragile umbrella over a landscape fractured by ambition. Yet, as the Zhou faded into memory, the true power shifted, coalescing around 7 formidable kingdoms: Qi, Tu, Yuan, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Qin. This was the Warring States period, a time of relentless conflict, of shifting alliances and brutal sieges. Each kingdom, in its own defense, had begun to erect barriers, not yet the unified dragon we know today, but rather isolated segments of earth and stone. Often, little more than rammed earth fortifications, designed to repel the immediate threat from a neighboring rival. Imagine, if you will, the landscape dotted with these nascent walls, stretching across valleys and climbing gentle slopes, each a testament to fear and a desperate hope for security. It was from this crucible of conflict that a force unlike any before it began to emerge from the western reaches, the state of Qin. Driven by an unyielding ambition and a ruthless efficiency, the Qin rulers, advised by brilliant strategists and legalist philosophers, steadily devoured their rivals. Their armies, disciplined and relentless, swept across the plains, conquering one kingdom after another. The year 221 BCE marked a pivotal moment. The culmination of generations of conquest when the last of the warring states, Qi, finally fell. With this victory, the king of Qin declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, a title that resonated with an unprecedented authority, signifying not merely a king, but a ruler of all under heaven. Qin Shi Huang's vision was not simply to conquer, but to unify. He saw a land scarred by division, crisscrossed by walls that separated rather than protected. His ambition was to forge a singular empire, an entity so vast and powerful that it would endure for 10,000 generations. To achieve this, he understood that the disparate defenses of the former warring states needed to be dismantled, or, more importantly, absorbed and integrated into a grand, unified system. He ordered the destruction of many of the internal walls that had once marked the boundaries between the conquered kingdoms, symbolically erasing the old divisions. But the walls facing outward, those protecting against the nomadic tribes of the northern steppes, these he saw as vital. The northern frontier had always been a source of anxiety. The Xiongnu, a formidable confederation of nomadic peoples, were a constant threat, their swift cavalry raids striking deep into settled agricultural lands. These tribes, masters of horseback warfare, moved with a fluidity that defied static defenses. And their incursions often left devastation in their wake. The existing walls, built piecemeal by states like Yan, Zhao, and Qin itself, were insufficient. They were often discontinuous, of varying construction quality, and lacked a coordinated defensive strategy. Qin Shi Huang's solution was audacious in its scale. He would connect and extend these disparate walls, transforming them into a single, unbroken barrier. A colossal serpent of stone and earth winding across the northern frontier. This monumental undertaking was not merely a military project. It was a profound declaration of imperial power, a physical manifestation of his unified vision. He mobilized an immense workforce, drawing upon soldiers, conscripted peasants, and even exiled criminals. The scale of human labor involved is almost unfathomable. Imagine hundreds of thousands, perhaps even 1 million people, toiling under the harsh sun, in biting winds, and through freezing winters. The construction methods varied, depending on the terrain and the availability of local materials. In some areas, where the land was flat, the traditional rammed earth technique was employed. Layers of earth, gravel, and sometimes even reeds or branches were pounded tightly between wooden frames, creating a remarkably durable, almost concrete-like structure. In mountainous regions, where earth was scarce, stone was quarried and meticulously fitted together. The logistics of such an operation were staggering. Transporting materials, feeding and housing the vast workforce, maintaining discipline, and coordinating efforts across thousands of miles of rugged terrain. One lesser-known detail of this period's construction is the ingenious use of local resources and the adaptability of the builders. In some sections, particularly in the Gansu corridor, the builders incorporated a type of desert plant called tamarix or red willow into the rammed earth. These thorny, resilient shrubs, when mixed with sand and gravel, provided a natural reinforcement, binding the earth together and making the wall more resistant to erosion. This demonstrates a deep practical understanding of the environment and an innovative approach to engineering, far beyond simply piling up stones. The purpose of this unified wall was multifaceted. Primarily, it was a physical barrier against the Xiongnu raids. While a wall could never entirely prevent incursions, it could channel them, force the nomads to dismount, and give warning to garrisons. It served as a raised road for rapid troop deployment and communication. Signal fires, lit from watchtowers, could transmit messages across vast distances in a relatively short time, alerting distant garrisons to impending attacks. But beyond its military function, the wall held immense symbolic power. It demarcated the boundary between the civilized agricultural lands of the empire and the nomadic barbarians of the north. It was a visible declaration of China's self-identity, a monumental assertion of its settled way of life against the perceived chaos of the steppes. However, historians still debate the true effectiveness of Qin Shi Huang's wall. Was it a truly impenetrable barrier, or more of a psychological deterrent? While it certainly hindered large-scale invasions, smaller raiding parties could often find ways around or over it. The sheer length of the wall made it difficult to garrison every section adequately, leaving vulnerable points. Perhaps the wall's greatest success lay not in its physical impermeability, but in its psychological impact, both on the Xiongnu, who now faced a unified and seemingly endless obstacle, and on the Chinese people, who saw a tangible representation of their emperor's power and their empire's unity. It was a project of immense national pride, even if built on the backs of immense suffering. The exact length of the wall constructed or renovated during the Qin Dynasty is also a point of scholarly discussion. While popular imagination often attributes the entire Great Wall to Qin Shi Huang, the reality is more nuanced. The Qin Wall was primarily an amalgamation and extension of existing fortifications. It stretched for thousands of kilometers, but its precise route and extent are difficult to ascertain due to the passage of time, erosion, and subsequent rebuilding efforts by later dynasties. Archaeological evidence suggests that many sections of the Qin Wall were indeed made of rammed earth, which is less durable than stone and thus less likely to survive intact. Yet the foundations, the sheer scale of the earthworks, still bear witness to this monumental endeavor. The legacy of Qin Shi Huang's wall is profound. It laid the conceptual and physical groundwork for what would become the Great Wall. While much of his original construction has long since crumbled or been buried beneath later additions, his vision of a unified defensive system, stretching across the northern frontier, endured. It became a template, an idea that future dynasties would return to again and again. The Han Dynasty, facing continued threats from the Xiongnu, would extensively repair, extend, and fortify the Qin Wall, often building directly on its foundations or alongside its remnants. They understood that the wall, in its essence, was more than just a military structure. It was a symbol of imperial continuity, a statement of enduring power. The cost of this ambition, however, was immense, not just in resources, but in human lives. The forced labor, the harsh conditions, the sheer physical exertion, all took a terrible toll. Legends and historical accounts speak of countless deaths, of bodies buried within the wall itself. Though archaeological evidence for this specific claim remains elusive, nevertheless, the suffering was real, a dark undercurrent to the emperor's grand vision. The very scale of the project, coupled with Qin Shi Huang's other autocratic policies, his burning of books, his persecution of scholars, his relentless pursuit of immortality, contributed to the deep resentment that simmered beneath the surface of his unified empire. When Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BCE, his empire, forged in fire and ambition, began to unravel. His successor was weak, and the vast network of control he had established quickly disintegrated. Rebellions erupted across the land, fueled by the very discontent that his harsh rule and monumental projects had sown. Within a few short years, the Qin Dynasty, which he had envisioned lasting for 10,000 generations, collapsed, giving way to the Han Dynasty. Yet the wall, or at least the idea of it, persisted. It stood as a silent testament to an emperor's will, a physical scar on the landscape, and a constant reminder of the ever-present threat from the north. The dragon had been born, though its scales were still forming, and its breath was yet to truly roar across the vast plains of China. The Qin's grand vision, though monumental, was but a prelude to an even more expansive chapter in the wall's story. As the Qin dynasty crumbled and the Han dynasty rose from its ashes around 206 BCE, a new era of ambition dawned, one that would see the frontier defenses not merely maintained, but dramatically extended and transformed. The early Han emperors, learning from the Qin's excesses and the subsequent chaos, initially pursued a policy of appeasement with the formidable Xiongnu Confederation to the north. Gifts of silk, grain, and even Han princesses were sent across the steppes in an effort to maintain a fragile peace. Yet this strategy proved unsustainable. The Xiongnu, a nomadic people skilled in cavalry warfare, continued their raids, their swift incursions a constant threat to the burgeoning Han agricultural heartland. It was under the reign of Emperor Wu, who ascended the throne in 141 BCE, that this defensive posture shifted dramatically. Emperor Wu, later known as Han Wudi, or the Martial Emperor, was a figure of immense energy and vision. He inherited a prosperous and stable empire, and he was determined to secure its borders and project its power far beyond the traditional Han territories. His reign, spanning over 5 decades, marked a period of unprecedented expansion and military might for the Han Dynasty. Emperor Wu understood that true security lay not in appeasement, but in actively confronting the Xiongnu threat and pushing the frontier outward. To achieve this, Emperor Wu launched a series of aggressive military campaigns against the Xiongnu. These campaigns were costly and arduous, often involving vast armies marching for months across desolate landscapes, but they were also remarkably successful. The Han forces, equipped with superior logistics and iron weaponry, gradually pushed the Xiongnu back, weakening their confederation and reclaiming vital border territories. As the military frontier advanced, so too did the wall. It was no longer simply a defensive barrier against immediate incursions. It became an instrument of imperial expansion, a tangible line drawn across the landscape to mark the furthest reach of Han power. The construction efforts under Emperor Wu were immense, perhaps even surpassing those of the Qin in sheer scale and geographical reach. Instead of merely repairing existing sections, the Han engineers and laborers extended the wall thousands of li, a traditional Chinese unit of distance, westward, pushing deep into what would become known as the Western regions, a vast and often desolate expanse of deserts, oases, and mountains that stretched towards Central Asia. These new sections of the wall were not always the towering stone and brick structures we often envision. In the arid western regions, where stone was scarce, the wall was often constructed from tamped earth, gravel, and layers of reeds or willow branches, compacted into incredibly durable ramparts. These earthen walls, though less visually imposing than their eastern counterparts, were remarkably effective against cavalry charges and provided a stable platform for watchtowers and garrisons. The purpose of this westward expansion was multifaceted. Primarily, it was to secure the newly conquered territories and protect the Han agricultural settlements that began to spring up along the frontier. But a more strategic and enduring goal was to safeguard the burgeoning trade routes that were beginning to connect China with the distant lands of Central Asia and beyond. These routes, collectively known to later generations as the Silk Road, were becoming increasingly vital for the Han economy and for its diplomatic ambitions. Precious silks, lacquerware, and ceramics flowed westward, while exotic goods like horses, spices, and precious stones made their way back to the Han capital. The wall, with its network of watchtowers, beacon fires, and garrison forts, acted as a protective spine for these arteries of commerce. Imagine the solitary watchtowers, standing like sentinels against the vastness of the Gobi Desert, their beacon fires ready to ignite at the first sign of trouble, sending smoke signals across hundreds of miles to warn distant garrisons. These signals, a sophisticated communication system, could transmit messages about enemy movements with remarkable speed. A single plume of smoke by day, or a solitary flame by night, might signify a small raiding party, while multiple beacons could signal a larger invasion. This intricate network allowed Han forces to react swiftly, dispatching cavalry units to intercept raiders or reinforcing threatened sections of the wall. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Han Wall construction was its reliance on a system of frontier commanderies and garrisons, rather than solely on a continuous physical barrier. While long stretches of wall were indeed built, especially in strategic passes and vulnerable plains, the overall defensive system was more nuanced. It integrated natural barriers like mountain ranges and deserts with fortified towns, military outposts, and a network of signaling towers. This approach allowed for greater flexibility and adaptation to the diverse geographical challenges of the frontier. For instance, in some areas, the wall might be a low earthwork, easily surmounted by a determined enemy, but its true strength lay in the heavily fortified watchtowers placed at regular intervals, each manned by vigilant soldiers ready to sound the alarm. The lives of the soldiers stationed along the Han Wall were harsh. They endured extreme temperatures, from scorching desert summers to bitter winter winds. Their duties included patrolling, maintaining the wall, cultivating small plots of land for sustenance, and above all, remaining ever vigilant. Archaeological discoveries along the Han frontier, particularly in places like Dunhuang and Gansu, have unearthed thousands of wooden slips and silk fragments, often containing detailed military reports, supply inventories, and even personal letters from soldiers. These fascinating glimpses into daily life reveal the meticulous organization of the Han military, the challenges of supplying distant outposts, and the human stories of those who guarded the empire's edge. One might find a report detailing the number of arrows expended in a skirmish, or a plea from a soldier for more winter clothing, painting a vivid picture of life on the frontier. Historians still debate the exact extent of the Han Wall's westernmost reach. While it is clear that it extended far beyond the Qin's original boundaries, precisely how far into the Tarim Basin, or even beyond it, remains a subject of ongoing archaeological investigation. Some scholars argue that the Han frontier defenses were less a continuous wall and more a series of fortified lines, beacon towers, and garrison towns that protected specific trade routes and strategic points. Others contend that long, continuous sections of earthen wall were indeed constructed across vast distances, even if they have largely eroded over the millennia. What is certain is that the Han Dynasty, under Emperor Wu, established a powerful and enduring presence in the western regions, laying the groundwork for centuries of cultural exchange and trade along the Silk Road. The strategic importance of the wall under the Han was not just military, it was also deeply symbolic. It represented the boundary between the settled agricultural lands of the Han and the nomadic steppes, between civilization and what was perceived as the untamed wilderness. It was a physical manifestation of the Han Empire's self-identity and its aspirations for order and control. The wall became a constant reminder of the empire's power and its determination to defend its people and its prosperity. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Han Wall expansion was its role in facilitating the Silk Road. By providing a relatively secure corridor through often dangerous territories, the wall allowed merchants, diplomats, and missionaries to travel with greater confidence. This security fostered an unprecedented exchange of goods, technologies, ideas, and religions between East and West. Buddhism, for example, is believed to have entered China along these very routes, spreading from India and Central Asia, sheltered in part by the protective shadow of the Han frontier defenses. The wall, therefore, was not merely a barrier, it was also, paradoxically, a conduit, enabling connections that would shape global history for millennia. The Han Dynasty's commitment to the wall continued long after Emperor Wu's reign. Subsequent emperors maintained and even further extended sections of the frontier defenses, adapting them to changing threats and geopolitical circumstances. The wall became a living entity, constantly evolving, repaired, rebuilt, and sometimes abandoned, reflecting the ebb and flow of imperial power and the shifting dynamics of the northern frontier. By the time the Han Dynasty finally collapsed in 220 CE, the wall had cemented its place not just as a physical structure, but as an integral part of the Chinese imperial imagination, a symbol of its enduring strength and its constant struggle against external forces. The vast network of Han walls, watchtowers, and garrisons, though often less grand in appearance than the later Ming sections, laid the crucial foundation for the wall's subsequent incarnations, shaping the very concept of a continuous frontier defense for centuries to come. It was a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance, a silent witness to the endless dance between expansion and defense, between settlement and nomadism, that defined much of early Chinese history. The echoes of Han might, once so vibrant along the wall, began to fade as the dynasty itself teetered on the brink. The vast empire, stretched thin by internal strife, economic woes, and relentless external pressures, eventually fractured. With the collapse of the Eastern Han in 220 CE, China plunged into an era of disunity, a period often referred to as the Three Kingdoms. The grand structure, a testament to unified power, now found itself caught in the crosscurrents of warring factions. Garrisons dwindled, watchtowers stood silent, and sections of the mighty rampart, once meticulously maintained, slowly surrendered to the relentless embrace of nature. Dust devils danced through broken battlements, and the wind, once carrying the shouts of vigilant guards, now whispered through crumbling stones. The wall, in many places, became a forgotten sentinel, its purpose momentarily lost amidst the chaos of a fractured realm. Yet, even in decline, its shadow lingered, a silent reminder of past glories and a potential foundation for future defense. As centuries passed, new powers rose and fell, each vying for control of the fragmented land. The Northern and Southern Dynasties period, stretching from the early 5th to the late 6th century, was particularly tumultuous. In the north, various non-Han peoples, often referred to as the Five Barbarians, established their own states, bringing new cultures and military strategies to the fore. These groups, while sometimes adopting Chinese customs, also presented new threats and challenges. The wall, though often neglected by the splintered Han successor states, still held strategic importance for these northern kingdoms. One such dynasty, the Northern Wei, established by the Tuava people, recognized the enduring value of the wall. Though their capital was further south, they understood the need for defense against other nomadic tribes. They undertook some repairs and even extended certain sections, particularly in the Datong region, demonstrating a pragmatic approach to inherited infrastructure. Their efforts, however, were often localized and lacked the grand unified vision of earlier dynasties. The wall during this time was less a continuous, unbroken line and more the series of fortified segments, each serving the immediate defensive needs of the local rulers. Imagine the stark contrast: a wall built for an empire, now a patchwork of defenses for smaller, often warring, states. The true revival, however, began to stir with the rise of the northern Qin Dynasty in the mid-6th century. This dynasty, ruling over much of northern China from 550 to 577 CE, faced persistent threats from the Gokturks to their north. Unlike their predecessors, who often relied on mobile cavalry tactics, the northern Qin leadership, perhaps learning from the successes and failures of past Han defenses, saw the wall as a vital, stationary bulwark. They embarked on an ambitious program of reconstruction and expansion, particularly between 555 and 557 CE. Historical records, such as the Book of Northern Qin, detail their extensive building efforts, mentioning the mobilization of vast labor forces, sometimes hundreds of thousands of conscripts, to repair and extend sections of the wall. They focused on strengthening the defenses around their capital, Ye, and along the northern frontiers, particularly in modern-day Shanxi and Hebei provinces. These sections were often built with packed earth and stone, mirroring earlier techniques but with a renewed sense of urgency. Their work was not merely repair. It was a significant rebuilding and, in some areas, a new construction. They aimed to create a more formidable barrier, often incorporating advanced defensive features for their time. The Northern Qin's commitment to the wall was profound, reflecting a strategic shift in how they viewed border defense. They understood that a strong, continuous barrier could channel and contain nomadic incursions, allowing their own forces to respond more effectively. This period marks a crucial transition, demonstrating that even after centuries of disunity, the fundamental concept of a northern defensive line remained deeply ingrained in Chinese military thought. Following the Northern Qin, the Northern Zhou Dynasty, which eventually supplanted them, also recognized the wall's importance. Though their reign was shorter, they too undertook repairs and extensions, particularly in the western sections. This continuous, though sometimes fragmented, effort by successive northern dynasties highlights a fascinating aspect of the wall's history: its adaptability. It wasn't merely a static monument. It was a dynamic entity, its form and function evolving with the changing political landscape and military threats. The wall, during these centuries of disunity, became a canvas upon which different rulers painted their own defensive strategies, sometimes adding new layers, sometimes patching old ones, but always, in some form, preserving its essential role. Then came the Sui Dynasty, a pivotal moment in Chinese history. Emerging from the northern Zhou, the Sui, under Emperor Wen, swiftly reunified China in 589 CE, ending nearly 4 centuries of division. This reunification brought with it a renewed sense of imperial purpose and an understanding that a strong unified state required a strong unified defense. The Sui emperors, particularly Emperor Wen and his successor Emperor Yang, initiated massive construction projects across the empire, and the Great Wall was no exception. They saw the wall not just as a defensive structure, but as a symbol of their newly consolidated power, a tangible representation of a unified China. The Sui undertook extensive repairs and new constructions along the northern frontier, particularly in the regions of modern-day Shanxi, Shanxi, and Inner Mongolia. Their efforts were driven by the persistent threat of the Eastern and Western Gokturks, who continued to raid Chinese territories. The Book of Sui records numerous instances of wall construction, often involving immense labor forces. For example, in 581 CE, Emperor Wen ordered the repair of the wall, mobilizing over 100,000 men. Later, in 607 CE, Emperor Yang reportedly conscripted over 1 million laborers to build the wall. Though this number is likely an exaggeration or includes all public works during that period, it nonetheless underscores the immense scale of their ambition. Historians still debate the exact extent of Sui wall construction. Some argue that much of their work involved repairing and reinforcing existing Han and Northern Dynasty sections, while others suggest they built entirely new stretches, particularly in areas where the threat was most acute. What is clear, however, is that the Sui significantly revitalized the wall, transforming it from a fragmented series of defenses into a more coherent and formidable barrier once again. They understood that a unified empire needed a unified defense, and the wall, in their eyes, was the ultimate expression of that principle. Their efforts laid the groundwork for future dynasties, demonstrating the enduring strategic value of the wall in protecting the heartland of China. The periods of decline and revival were not merely about the physical state of the wall. They reflected the ebb and flow of Chinese imperial power itself. When the empire was strong and unified, the wall flourished, a symbol of its might and vigilance. When the empire fractured, the wall too suffered, becoming a fragmented relic of a bygone era. Yet its inherent strategic value meant it was never truly abandoned. Like a dormant seed, it lay waiting for the right conditions, a strong, unified hand to sprout anew. Consider the human element in all of this. The countless laborers, conscripted from every corner of the empire, toiled under harsh conditions. Their lives, often anonymous in the grand sweep of history, were intimately tied to the wall's construction and repair. They hauled stones, pounded earth, and endured the biting winds of the northern frontier. Perhaps these walls whispered stories of their sweat and sacrifice to the stars, stories of resilience and the enduring human capacity for monumental effort. The transition from the Sui to the Tang Dynasty, though swift, saw a shift in defensive strategy. The early Tang, with its powerful military and diplomatic prowess, initially adopted a more offensive stance against the nomadic tribes, preferring to engage them beyond the wall, rather than relying solely on a static defense. This led to a period where the wall, while still maintained in some sections, was not the primary focus of imperial defense. Yet, as the Tang Empire matured and faced new internal and external challenges, the wall would once again find its place in the strategic calculus of future rulers, demonstrating its timeless adaptability and enduring significance in the vast tapestry of Chinese history. The wall, in its long, winding journey, truly mirrors the fortunes of the empire it sought to protect, a silent, enduring witness to the rise, fall, and rebirth of dynasties. As the dust of the northern and southern dynasties settled, a new dawn broke over China, heralded by the Sui Dynasty, 581 to 618 CE. Though brief, its impact was profound, laying the groundwork for one of China's most glorious epochs. Emperor Wen, the founder, unified the fractured land, and his son, Emperor Yang, embarked on colossal infrastructure projects, most notably the Grand Canal. Yet, even as the empire looked inward to connect its vast agricultural heartlands with its burgeoning cities, the northern frontier remained a persistent concern. The Sui, much like their predecessors, understood the strategic imperative of northern defenses. They undertook significant repairs and extensions to the wall, mobilizing vast numbers of laborers, sometimes conscripting entire villages for the arduous task. These efforts, while securing the frontier for a time, also contributed to the dynasty's eventual downfall, as the immense human cost and economic strain fueled widespread discontent and rebellion. From the ashes of the Sui rose the magnificent Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, an era often hailed as China's Golden Age. Its capital, Chang'an, became the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world, a vibrant hub of trade, culture, and intellectual exchange. The Tang Empire, at its zenith, was a truly formidable power, extending its influence deep into Central Asia, controlling the vital Silk Road routes. This expansionist policy, coupled with a strong military, fundamentally altered the perception and strategic role of the wall. For much of the Tang period, the empire's borders were pushed far beyond the traditional lines of the wall, sometimes hundreds of miles to the north and west. The primary defense strategy shifted from a static, linear barrier to a more dynamic, offensive posture. Tang armies, renowned for their cavalry and disciplined infantry, met nomadic threats on their own terms, often engaging them far from the agricultural heartland. During this period, the wall, in many sections, receded from its frontline defensive role. It became less a barrier against direct invasion and more a secondary line of defense, a logistical backbone for troop movements, or simply a marker of internal administrative boundaries. Some sections fell into disrepair, overgrown by weeds, their watchtowers silent sentinels gazing over peaceful fields rather than hostile steppes. Yet, its legacy endured. Even when not actively maintained, the very idea of the wall, its centuries-old presence, continued to shape the Chinese psyche, representing a historical demarcation between the settled agrarian world and the nomadic wilderness. It was a silent testament to past struggles and a reminder of the enduring threat from the north, even when that threat was temporarily subdued. However, the Tang's golden age was not without its shadows. The An Lushan Rebellion, 755 to 763 CE, a devastating internal conflict, profoundly weakened the dynasty, shattering its military might and economic stability. This rebellion, initiated by a general of Sogdian and Turkic origin, revealed the vulnerabilities of an empire that had grown perhaps too confident in its own strength. As the central government's control waned, frontier garrisons were recalled to quell internal unrest, leaving the northern borders more exposed. In the aftermath, the Tang found itself increasingly on the defensive, no longer capable of projecting power as far as it once had. This period saw a renewed, albeit localized, interest in repairing and utilizing sections of the wall, particularly in areas vulnerable to incursions from resurgent nomadic groups like the Uyghurs and the Tibetans. Yet, these efforts were often piecemeal, lacking the grand, unified vision of earlier dynasties. Historians still debate the extent to which the Tang consciously abandoned the wall as a primary defense strategy versus simply outgrowing its immediate necessity due to their military prowess. Was it a deliberate policy shift, or merely a consequence of an expanded empire whose frontiers lay far beyond the wall's reach? Perhaps it was a blend of both, a pragmatic adaptation to a period of unprecedented strength, only for the wall to reclaim some of its importance as that strength waned. The very concept of the wall, its symbolic weight, remained potent. even when its physical structure was less emphasized. It was an idea as much as it was stone and earth. As the Tang Dynasty slowly unraveled, giving way to the tumultuous 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, 907 to 960 CE, the northern frontier once again became a volatile landscape. This era of fragmentation saw various short-lived dynasties and independent kingdoms vying for control, often engaging in fierce internal conflicts that left them vulnerable to external pressures. The Khitan Liao Dynasty, a powerful nomadic empire to the north, emerged as a dominant force, seizing territories that included significant portions of the wall. For the first time in centuries, a major non-Han dynasty controlled significant sections of the wall, turning it into their own defensive barrier against the south, or using it to delineate their expanding territories. This marked a fascinating reversal of roles, where a structure built to keep out northern invaders was now, in parts, maintained and utilized by them. The subsequent Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE, inherited a vastly different geopolitical landscape than the Tang. Though culturally brilliant and economically prosperous, the Song was militarily weaker than its predecessors, particularly in its ability to project power beyond its borders. Faced with powerful northern empires, first the Khitan Liao, then the Tangut Western Shah, and finally the Jurchen Qin Dynasty, the Song adopted a more defensive posture. Their strategy relied heavily on diplomacy, tribute payments, and the development of advanced siege warfare technologies, including gunpowder weapons, rather than large-scale frontier fortifications. The traditional lines of the wall, particularly the more ancient sections, lay largely outside Song control, often within the territories of their northern adversaries. The Song themselves did not undertake massive wall-building projects on the scale of the Qin or Han. Their defensive efforts focused more on strong garrison cities, strategic passes, and riverine defenses, creating a network of localized strongholds rather than a continuous linear barrier. This was partly due to circumstance. The most strategically vital sections of the wall were already in enemy hands, and partly due to a different military philosophy. The Song's military emphasis was on infantry and naval power, less on the cavalry that dominated the northern steppes. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the southern wall of the Song. While not part of the traditional Great Wall system, the Song did construct extensive fortifications in the south, particularly against the Jurchen Qin, who eventually conquered northern China and established the Qin Dynasty, 1115 to 1234 CE. These southern defenses, often built along rivers like the Huai and the Yangtze, served a similar strategic purpose to the northern wall, to protect the agricultural heartland and the imperial capital. They were a testament to the enduring Chinese concept of a fortified border, even if the physical location and specific enemy had shifted. The scholarly dispute regarding the Song's relationship with the wall often centers on whether their lack of focus on its large-scale maintenance was a strategic blunder or a pragmatic adaptation. Did their reliance on diplomacy and internal defenses ultimately weaken them, or were they simply making the best of a difficult geopolitical situation where the traditional wall was no longer theirs to command? Some argue that had the Song invested more in northern frontier defenses, they might have fared better against the Jurchen. Others contend that the sheer military might, the threat of the northern empires, particularly their cavalry, rendered a static wall largely ineffective, and the Song's focus on economic development and internal stability was a more rational approach given their limitations. Perhaps the Song understood that a wall, however grand, could not contain the relentless tide of history and the shifting balance of power. As the Song era drew to a close, culminating in the Mongol conquest and the establishment of the Yuan Dynasty, 1271 to 1368 CE. The wall's role shifted once more. Under Mongol rule, China became part of a vast, contiguous empire that stretched across Eurasia. For the first time in centuries, the traditional northern frontier was effectively erased, absorbed into the greater Mongol dominion. The wall, in many sections, became obsolete as a defensive barrier. It was no longer needed to keep out the very people who now ruled from Beijing. Some sections continued to serve as local boundaries or pathways, but its grand strategic purpose was largely dormant. The nomadic rulers, accustomed to open steppes and swift movement, had little need for fixed fortifications on such a grand scale. Yet even in its dormancy, the wall continued to exist, a silent witness to the ebb and flow of empires. Its stones held the memories of countless generations of soldiers, laborers, and emperors. Perhaps these walls whispered stories to the stars, recounting tales of Qin's ambition, Han's resilience, Tang's glory, and Song's quiet strength. They stood as a physical embodiment of a persistent idea, the demarcation of civilization, the enduring tension between settled life and nomadic freedom. And as the Mongol grip on China began to loosen, giving way to the stirrings of a new Han Dynasty, the wall would once again awaken, ready to play a pivotal, perhaps its most iconic role in the unfolding drama of Chinese history. Its long slumber was nearing its end, and a new chapter of monumental construction and strategic significance was about to begin. The winds that swept across the northern plains, once carrying the whispers of Song Dynasty anxieties, now sang a different tune. A tune of conquest, of a world reshaped by the thunder of hooves. From the vast, undulating steppes of Mongolia, a new power had risen, one that would not merely challenge, but utterly transform the landscape of China. This was the era of the Mongols, a force unlike any seen before, whose relentless expansion would eventually forge the largest contiguous land empire in history. By the early 13th century, under the visionary leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongol tribes had been unified, their formidable cavalry sweeping across Asia with astonishing speed. Their military tactics were revolutionary, emphasizing mobility, discipline, and psychological warfare. They moved like a storm across the land, leaving in their wake a new order. For the Great Wall, this period marked a profound shift. The very entity it had been built to repel was now its master. The Mongol conquests were not a single swift blow, but a methodical, devastating campaign that unfolded over decades. First, they turned their attention to the Jurchen-led Qin Dynasty in the north, which controlled much of the traditional Great Wall territories. The Qin, despite their own military prowess, were unable to withstand the sustained Mongol onslaught. City after city fell, their defenses, including sections of the wall, proving insufficient against an enemy that could bypass fixed fortifications with ease, or simply overwhelm them with sheer force and ingenious siegecraft. Then came the conquest of the southern Song Dynasty, a process that spanned from the 1230s to 1279. This was a long, arduous struggle, particularly in the south where the terrain was more challenging and the Song put up a fierce resistance. But ultimately, the Song, weakened by internal strife and a reliance on naval power that was less effective against a land-based juggernaut, succumbed. With the fall of the Song, all of China came under Mongol rule, an unprecedented achievement. In 1271, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, formally established the Yuan Dynasty, proclaiming himself Emperor of China. This was a pivotal moment, not just for China, but for the entire world. For the first time in centuries, China was ruled by a non-Han dynasty that controlled the entirety of its vast territory. The capital was established at Dadu, modern-day Beijing, a city that would forever bear the imprint of Yuan design. Under the Yuan, the purpose of the Great Wall fundamentally changed. It was no longer a defensive bulwark against invaders from the north, because the rulers were from the north. The very people it was designed to keep out now sat on the dragon throne. Consequently, large sections of the wall fell into disrepair. The meticulous maintenance, the constant patrols, the rebuilding efforts that had characterized previous dynasties largely ceased. Stone blocks crumbled, watchtowers sagged, and sections became overgrown with vegetation, slowly returning to the earth from which they had been built. This period of dormancy, however, was not one of complete abandonment. While its primary defensive function was obsolete, certain sections of the wall retained localized utility. Some parts served as communication routes, particularly for the vast postal system that the Mongols established, which was remarkably efficient, allowing messages and goods to travel across their enormous empire with unprecedented speed. Other sections were used as pathways for merchants and travelers. As the Pax Mongolica, the period of relative peace and stability across the Mongol Empire, fostered an explosion of trade and cultural exchange along the Silk Road. Marco Polo, the famous Venetian traveler, journeyed through Yuan China during this time, observing its wonders, though his accounts of the wall itself are surprisingly sparse, perhaps reflecting its diminished strategic importance. It's interesting to consider that while the Yuan emperors were of Mongol descent, they largely adopted Chinese administrative practices and cultural norms to govern their vast new domain. They maintained the imperial bureaucracy, patronized the arts, and even continued some public works projects, though these rarely focused on the wall. Their focus was on consolidating power, expanding trade, and maintaining control over a diverse and sprawling empire. The Great Wall, in their eyes, was a relic of a bygone era, a monument to the divisions they had overcome. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the use of some wall sections as agricultural terraces. In certain areas, particularly where the wall traversed mountainous terrain, the abandoned fortifications provided ready-made contours for terraced farming, allowing local communities to cultivate crops on otherwise challenging slopes. The stones that once repelled invaders now supported the growth of grain, a subtle yet profound transformation of purpose. Historians still debate the extent of the wall's disrepair during the Yuan Dynasty. While it's clear that large-scale maintenance ceased, some scholars argue that localized garrisons or communities might have maintained certain sections for their own protection against bandits or local unrest, rather than against a foreign power. Others contend that the neglect was widespread and that the wall truly entered a period of profound decay, only to be resurrected and rebuilt by later dynasties. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a mosaic of localized conditions rather than a uniform state across its thousands of miles. The Yuan Dynasty, despite its foreign origins, brought a period of remarkable cultural fusion to China. Innovations in science, astronomy, and cartography flourished. The Grand Canal, a vital artery for north-south transport, was extended and improved, demonstrating the Yuan's pragmatic approach to infrastructure that served their economic and administrative needs. Yet, the wall remained largely outside this focus. Its silent stones stood as a testament to a different kind of power, one rooted in sedentary defense rather than nomadic conquest. Perhaps these walls, in their quiet slumber, dreamed of the thunder of hooves, not as a threat, but as a memory. They had witnessed centuries of conflict, of imperial ambition, of the rise and fall of dynasties. Now, under the Yuan, they experienced a unique kind of peace, a peace born not of successful defense, but of conquest so complete that defense became irrelevant. The wall was no longer a symbol of division, but an artifact of a unified empire, albeit one ruled by an outsider. The Yuan dynasty's reign, though significant, was ultimately shorter than many of its predecessors, lasting less than a century, from 1271 to 1368. Its decline was multifaceted, stemming from a combination of factors: costly military expeditions, particularly failed invasions of Japan and Java; economic instability, including rampant inflation; natural disasters like floods and famines; and growing resentment among the Han Chinese population towards Mongol rule. The very vastness of their empire, which had been their strength, eventually became a challenge to govern effectively. As the 14th century progressed, rebellions began to simmer across China. Secret societies and peasant uprisings gained momentum, fueled by widespread discontent. The Red Turban Rebellion, a prominent movement, eventually coalesced under the leadership of a former peasant and Buddhist monk named Zhu Yuanzhang. His forces steadily gained ground, pushing the Yuan out of the heartland of China. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang captured Dadu, the Yuan capital, and proclaimed the establishment of a new dynasty, the Ming. The last Yuan emperor, Togon Temur, fled north to Mongolia, effectively ending Mongol rule over China. The wheel of history had turned once more. The Han Chinese were back in power, and with their Ritu, Ren, the Great Wall would once again find its purpose, resurrected and rebuilt on a scale never before imagined. The period of its quiet slumber was over, and a new, grand chapter was about to begin for the ancient barrier. The legacy of the Yuan, however, would forever be etched into the wall's story, a unique interlude when its stones bore witness to an empire that transcended its very reason for being. The dust of the Yuan dynasty had settled, leaving behind a land yearning for its own heart, its own rhythm. From this longing, a new power emerged, resolute and deeply rooted in the soil of China, the Ming Dynasty. Their reign, beginning in 1368, would mark a profound shift in the wall's destiny, transforming it from a series of disparate defenses into the monumental structure we largely recognize today. The Ming emperors, having overthrown the Mongol rule, understood intimately the persistent threat from the north. They had seen how easily the vast plains could disgorge cavalry, how swiftly the winds of conquest could sweep across the land. Thus, their vision for the wall was not merely one of defense, but of an unyielding declaration of sovereignty, a physical manifestation of their commitment to safeguarding their realm. Unlike their predecessors, who often relied on rammed earth and local materials, the Ming embarked on an unprecedented construction campaign, leveraging the era's advancements in engineering and material science. This was the age of brick and stone, of meticulously cut granite and fired kilns producing millions upon millions of sturdy bricks. Imagine the sheer scale of such an undertaking. Vast quarries carved into mountainsides, timber felled from distant forests, and clay dug from riverbeds. Then, the arduous process of transportation, often by human hand or simple carts, across rugged terrain to the wall's remote construction sites. Each brick, each stone block, represented countless hours of labor, a testament to the collective will of an empire determined to secure its borders. The Ming's approach to the wall was systematic and comprehensive. They didn't just repair existing sections, they rebuilt them, reinforced them, and extended them with an unparalleled intensity. This was particularly true along the critical northern frontier, where Mongol remnants and other nomadic tribes continued to pose a significant menace. The emperors, particularly Yongle and later Jiajing and Wanli, poured immense resources into these projects. They established specialized military commands dedicated to wall construction and maintenance, employing hundreds of thousands of soldiers, laborers, and skilled artisans. It's said that entire villages were relocated to provide manpower for these massive endeavors, their lives becoming inextricably linked with the wall's relentless advance. One of the most striking features of the Ming Wall is its architectural sophistication. Unlike the earlier, simpler earthen ramparts, the Ming sections boast intricate watchtowers, formidable fortresses, and strategically placed beacon towers designed to communicate signals across vast distances. These watchtowers, often 2 stories high, served as barracks, armories, and observation posts. Their sturdy construction, with crenellated parapets and arrow slits, speaks to a meticulous understanding of defensive warfare. Imagine standing atop one of these towers on a clear day, the wind whipping past, and seeing the walls snake across the landscape, disappearing into the distant haze. A truly awe-inspiring sight that must have instilled both fear in invaders and a sense of security in those it protected. The construction methods themselves were ingenious for their time. Mortar made from slaked lime, sticky rice flour, and even egg whites was used to bind the bricks and stones, creating a bond so strong that sections of the wall have withstood centuries of erosion and seismic activity. This unique, sticky rice mortar, a lesser-known detail, reveals the practical ingenuity of Ming engineers. They understood that mere physical bulk was not enough. The wall needed to be a cohesive, unyielding entity. The precision with which these massive stones and bricks were laid, often without the aid of modern machinery, is a testament to the skill and dedication of the laborers. One can almost hear the rhythmic clang of hammers, the shouts of foremen, and the steady breath of men hauling heavy loads as they painstakingly assemble this colossal barrier. Yet, despite its impressive scale and robust construction, the Ming Wall was not without its strategic vulnerabilities. Historians still debate whether the wall was truly an effective military deterrent or more of a psychological barrier. While it certainly hindered large-scale invasions and forced nomadic raiders to seek out weaker points, it could often be bypassed or breached. The sheer length of the wall meant that many sections were sparsely garrisoned, making them susceptible to determined attacks. Furthermore, the cost of maintaining such a vast structure and its garrisons was astronomical, placing a significant strain on the imperial treasury. Perhaps the wall's greatest value lay not in its absolute impenetrability, but in its ability to channel and control the movements of nomadic groups, forcing them into predictable choke points where they could be more easily engaged by Ming armies. It was a strategy of attrition and control rather than absolute exclusion. The Ming Dynasty's obsession with the wall also reflected a deeper cultural shift. After the foreign rule of the Yuan, the Ming emperors sought to reassert a distinct Chinese identity, emphasizing stability, order, and a return to traditional Confucian values. The wall, in this context, became a potent symbol of this renewed national consciousness, a physical embodiment of the boundary between civilized China and the barbarian lands beyond. It was a declaration of self, etched in stone and brick across the northern frontier. This symbolic power was perhaps as important as its military function, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose among the Han Chinese population. The most famous sections of the Great Wall, such as Badaling, Mutianyu, and Jinshanling, are largely products of the Ming era. These sections, with their imposing watchtowers, steep inclines, and breathtaking vistas showcase the zenith of Ming wall construction. Imagine the effort required to build these sections across precipitous mountain ridges, sometimes at angles so steep that the wall appears to defy gravity. It was a monumental task, often undertaken in harsh weather conditions, with workers enduring scorching summers and freezing winters. The human cost, though unquantifiable, must have been immense. Many laborers perished from exhaustion, accidents, or disease, their lives becoming an anonymous part of the wall's enduring legacy. Their silent sacrifices are woven into the very fabric of the stones. As the Ming Dynasty progressed, the focus on the wall intensified, particularly during the mid to late Ming period when threats from the resurgent Oirat Mongols and later the Manchus became more pronounced. Generals like Qi Jiguang, a renowned military strategist of the 16th century, dedicated themselves to improving the wall's defenses and training its garrisons. He introduced new tactics, built additional fortifications, and emphasized the importance of coordinated defense. His efforts significantly strengthened the wall in critical areas, particularly around Beijing, the capital. One could almost feel the renewed urgency in the air, the constant vigilance against the winds of change blowing from the north. Yet, even with these improvements, the wall could not ultimately prevent the Ming Dynasty's downfall. The internal decay of the empire, marked by corruption, political infighting, and peasant rebellions, proved to be a greater threat than any external enemy. In 1644, the Manchu armies, who would go on to establish the Qing Dynasty, did not breach the wall through a direct assault on its strongest sections. Instead, they were famously let through the Shanhai Pass, the easternmost stronghold of the wall, by a Ming general who betrayed his emperor in a desperate attempt to quell a peasant uprising. This moment serves as a poignant reminder that even the most formidable physical barrier cannot withstand the erosion of internal cohesion. The wall, magnificent as it was, could not protect an empire that was already crumbling from within. With the fall of the Ming and the rise of the Qing Dynasty, the wall's role began to change. The Manchu rulers, having originated from beyond the wall themselves, did not view it with the same defensive urgency as the Ming. While they maintained certain sections and used it for customs control and border management, they generally adopted a more conciliatory approach to the nomadic peoples of the north, integrating many of them into their empire. The wall, therefore, gradually lost its primary military function, slowly receding from the forefront of imperial strategy. It became less a barrier and more a symbol, a historical relic of a bygone era's anxieties and ambitions. But even as its military purpose waned, the wall continued to stand, a silent witness to centuries of history. Its weathered stones and crumbling battlements became repositories of countless stories, of soldiers standing guard under star-strewn skies, of laborers toiling under the relentless sun, of emperors gazing northward with a mixture of hope and fear. It is a monument not just to defense, but to human perseverance, ingenuity, and the enduring desire to define and protect one's home. The Ming Dynasty's legacy is etched into every brick and stone of the wall, a testament to their vision, their labor, and their profound impact on the landscape of China. As the sun sets over its ancient contours, one can almost hear the echoes of their efforts, whispering through the valleys and across the mountain peaks, a timeless narrative of human endeavor. The wind, a constant companion along the wall, carried more than just dust and the scent of distant pines. It carried the whispers of lives lived, of hands calloused, and of hearts that beat to the rhythm of an endless watch. Life on the Ming Wall was a stark tableau, painted in shades of duty, endurance, and the ever-present shadow of the northern frontier. For the soldiers, the Bing, and the laborers, the Minfu, who formed the living sinews of this colossal serpent, existence was defined by the harsh realities of their environment and the unyielding demands of their imperial masters. Imagine a typical day beginning not with the crow of a rooster, but with the chilling bite of pre-dawn air, often thick with mist or the fine powder of wind-whipped sand. Inside the watchtowers, small fires might still glow, embers offering a meager warmth against the pervasive chill. Soldiers, roused from fitful sleep on straw mats or rough wooden platforms, would don their padded tunics, perhaps an iron helmet, and grasp their weapons, a spear, a crossbow, or the newly favored firearms that were slowly making their way into Ming military doctrine. The first task was always the same: scanning the horizon. From the high vantage points of the wall, their eyes would sweep across the vast, undulating landscape, searching for any telltale sign of movement: a dust cloud, a distant rider, the glint of sun on metal. This constant vigilance was not merely a duty, it was the very essence of their survival, and by extension, the survival of the empire they guarded. The Ming Dynasty, particularly during its middle and later periods, relied heavily on a system of garrisons and watchtowers to man the wall. These were not always densely populated stretches. Often, a small group of soldiers, perhaps 5 to 10, would be stationed in a single tower, responsible for a specific section of the wall. Their lives were isolated, punctuated only by the occasional supply convoy or the arrival of a new detachment. Communication was vital, and the wall itself was designed to facilitate it. Smoke signals by day, fire signals by night, these were the ancient telegraphs of the frontier. A single plume of smoke might indicate a small raiding party, while a series of fires could signal a major invasion. The speed and accuracy of these signals could mean the difference between a successful defense and a catastrophic breach. Historians still debate the precise efficiency of this signaling system across the entire length of the Ming Wall. While the concept was sound, the vast distances and the vagaries of weather surely presented challenges, leaving us to wonder how often a crucial message was delayed or misinterpreted amidst the swirling fogs or blinding snows. Beyond the immediate threat of invasion, the daily grind was relentless. Food was often basic and monotonous: millet or wheat porridge, dried vegetables, perhaps some salted meat if supplies were plentiful. Water, a precious commodity in many arid sections, had to be carefully managed, often transported from distant wells or collected from rainfall. The logistics of supplying thousands of soldiers and laborers across such a vast and challenging terrain were staggering. Supply lines stretched for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, vulnerable to bandits, natural disasters, and the sheer inefficiency of a pre-modern bureaucracy. Grain, weapons, clothing, building materials, all had to be transported, often by human porters or pack animals, along treacherous mountain paths or through desolate plains. This logistical nightmare alone consumed immense resources and manpower, a testament to the Ming state's commitment, however flawed, to maintaining its northern defense. For the laborers, the Minfu, life was even harder. Many were conscripted peasants, forced to leave their fields and families to toil on the wall. Others were convicts, sentenced to hard labor as punishment. Their work was backbreaking: quarry, raying stone from distant mountains, hauling heavy bricks and earth, mixing mortar, and constructing or repairing sections of the wall. Tools were rudimentary: picks, shovels, baskets, and simple levers. The sheer scale of the construction, particularly during the peak building periods of the 15th and 16th centuries, meant that thousands upon thousands of these laborers were constantly engaged in grueling physical tasks. Disease was rampant in the crowded, unsanitary camps that sprang up along the wall. Malnutrition, exposure to the elements, and injuries from accidents were common. It's no exaggeration to say that countless lives were sacrificed in the building of the Ming Wall, their bones perhaps interred within the very ramparts they helped to raise. This grim reality is often overlooked in the romanticized image of the wall, a stark reminder of the human cost of such grand imperial projects. Yet, life was not solely defined by hardship. Around the garrisons and larger watchtowers, small communities began to form. Families of soldiers, merchants, and artisans would settle nearby, creating a microcosm of Ming society on the frontier. Women played a crucial role, managing households, raising children, and sometimes contributing to the local economy by weaving, sewing, or preparing food. Children, growing up in the shadow of the colossal barrier, would learn the rhythms of military life, perhaps dreaming of one day joining their fathers on the ramparts. These settlements, though often temporary, provided a semblance of normalcy and a vital support system for the soldiers, breaking the monotony of their isolated lives. They were places where stories were told, songs were sung, and the simple joys of human connection could momentarily eclipse the harsh realities of the frontier. One lesser-known detail of life on the wall concerns the use of innovative defense mechanisms beyond just the physical barrier. The Ming military incorporated a variety of ingenious traps and deterrents. Beyond the obvious pitfalls and sharpened stakes, some sections of the wall were equipped with elaborate systems of rolling logs or stone avalanches, designed to be triggered from above, sending debris cascading down on attacking forces. There were also sections where the wall was deliberately constructed with a concave slope on the enemy side, making it incredibly difficult for ladders to gain purchase. These subtle yet effective engineering choices speak to a sophisticated understanding of defensive warfare that went beyond mere brute force. The constant threat from the north shaped everything. Raids by various nomadic tribes, particularly the Mongols, were a persistent concern throughout the Ming Dynasty. These were not always full-scale invasions. Often, they were swift, brutal incursions aimed at plunder and disruption. The soldiers on the wall had to be prepared for anything, from a handful of opportunistic raiders to a coordinated assault by thousands of horsemen. This required not only physical strength, but also mental fortitude. The psychological toll of constant vigilance, of living with the ever-present threat of violence, must have been immense. Perhaps these walls, in their silent immensity, absorbed not only the sounds of battle, but also the anxieties, the hopes, and the quiet despair of the men who stood guard upon them, whispering their stories to the tireless winds. The Ming military structure along the wall evolved over time. Early Ming garrisons were often self-sufficient agricultural military colonies, known as Weisuo. Soldiers would farm the land during peacetime and train for battle, providing their own food and supplies. This system, while initially effective, began to decline in the later Ming period due to corruption, desertion, and the increasing specialization of warfare. By the 16th century, the Ming largely shifted to a standing army system, with soldiers paid salaries and supplied by the central government. This change, while intended to improve efficiency, also introduced new logistical challenges and financial burdens on the imperial treasury. Despite the hardships, there was a profound sense of duty that permeated life on the wall. For many, it was an ancestral calling, a legacy passed down through generations. They were the guardians of the Middle Kingdom, the protectors of civilization against the perceived chaos of the northern steppes. This sense of purpose, however challenging, provided a framework for their existence. The wall was not just a physical barrier, it was a symbol, a testament to the resilience of the Ming people, and a constant reminder of the fundamental divide between their settled agricultural society and the nomadic world beyond. As the centuries wore on, the wall became more than just a military fortification. It became a landscape in itself, a lived environment. Paths were worn smooth along its ramparts by countless patrolling feet. Stones were polished by the touch of hands over generations. The very air around it seemed to hum with the echoes of human endeavor. The watchtowers, once stark and new, weathered into the landscape, becoming silent sentinels, their brickwork softened by the sun and rain, their battlements etched with the stories of forgotten skirmishes. Even today, walking along certain remote sections of the wall, one can almost feel the presence of those who lived and died there, their spirits woven into the very fabric of this enduring monument. The silence of the vast landscape is broken only by the wind, carrying whispers from a distant past, inviting us to imagine the lives that unfolded along this magnificent, formidable frontier. The Great Wall, in its sprawling, serpentine majesty, was never solely a weapon of war, nor merely a barrier against mounted raiders. Its purpose, like the very land it traversed, was multifaceted, shifting with the winds of dynasty and the tides of human endeavor. It rose, stone upon stone, not just as a shield, but as a profound symbol, a tangible embodiment of a burgeoning Chinese identity, defining a vast civilization against a world perceived as alien and often hostile. Imagine standing atop its weathered ramparts, gazing north across the undulating plains. To the south lay the cultivated fields, the bustling cities, the intricate tapestry of Han culture. To the north, the wild, untamed steppes, the domain of nomadic tribes whose ways of life were utterly alien to the settled agriculturalists of the Central Plains. The wall, therefore, became a monumental line in the sand, a declaration of us versus them. It solidified a collective consciousness, fostering a sense of shared heritage and destiny among those who lived within its protective embrace. This psychological demarcation was perhaps as potent as any physical defense, instilling a sense of belonging and a collective identity that transcended local allegiances, uniting disparate regions under a common banner. But the wall's role as a border marker was not always absolute or static. While it delineated a clear boundary in theory, in practice, its influence ebbed and flowed. During periods of strong imperial control, the wall truly functioned as a regulated frontier, with watchtowers signaling incursions and garrisons ready to respond. Yet during times of internal strife or dynastic weakness, its effectiveness waned, and its gates might open more readily to tribute missions, or even at times, to the passage of those who sought to challenge the imperial order. Historians still debate the true extent to which the wall prevented large-scale invasions versus simply channeling them through specific passes. Was it a complete deterrent, or more of a funnel, forcing nomadic armies to concentrate their forces at predictable points where Chinese defenses could be strongest? The answer likely lies in a complex interplay of both, varying significantly across different eras. Beyond its military and symbolic functions, the wall was also a conduit for trade, an unexpected artery of commerce that pulsed with life. Despite its formidable appearance, certain gates and passes along its length became vital checkpoints for the exchange of goods and ideas. Imagine the scene at a bustling gate like Shanghai Guan or Jiayu Guan. Caravans laden with silk, tea, and ceramics moving northward, meeting merchants from the steppes offering horses, furs, and jade. These exchanges, though often regulated and taxed by imperial authorities, were crucial for both sides. The nomadic tribes, while self-sufficient in many ways, craved the manufactured goods and agricultural products of the Chinese Empire, while the Chinese valued the robust horses and exotic commodities from the north. The wall, rather than being an impenetrable barrier, thus facilitated a controlled flow of goods, acting as a customs house on a grand scale. This economic interaction, though sometimes punctuated by conflict, fostered a strange interdependence, binding distant peoples together through the invisible threads of commerce. Moreover, the wall served as a crucial infrastructure for communication. The network of watchtowers, often within sight of one another, allowed for rapid transmission of signals across vast distances. Smoke signals by day, fire signals by night, could carry news of an approaching enemy or an urgent imperial decree with remarkable speed. A message could travel hundreds of miles in a matter of hours, a feat of ancient communication technology that underpinned the empire's ability to respond to threats and maintain control over its extensive territories. This sophisticated signaling system, though often overlapped, looked in popular narratives, was a vital component of the wall's overall utility. Perhaps one of the most profound, yet subtle, roles of the Great Wall was its function as a psychological barrier against the unknown. For the common people living within its shadow, the wall represented the edge of their known world, the boundary beyond which lay lands and cultures that were often imagined with a mixture of fear and fascination. The vast, empty spaces beyond the ramparts were not just geographically distant, they were culturally alien, populated by peoples whose customs, languages, and beliefs were profoundly different. The wall, therefore, acted as a comforting presence, a tangible reassurance that the familiar, ordered world of the Middle Kingdom was protected from the wild, unpredictable forces that lay beyond. This sense of security, however illusory at times, fostered a deep-seated belief in the superiority and distinctiveness of Chinese civilization, reinforcing the idea of China as the central kingdom around which the world revolved. Consider the Ming Dynasty, a period, 1368 to 1644 CE, during which much of the wall we see today was constructed or significantly reinforced. The Ming rulers, deeply scarred by the Mongol Yuan Dynasty's rule, were intensely focused on reasserting Han Chinese identity and securing their northern borders. The construction efforts during this era were unprecedented in scale and ambition, reflecting a profound commitment to defining and defending the empire. The wall became a monumental testament to Ming power and their determination to prevent another foreign conquest. It was not merely a defensive line, but a statement of national resolve, a physical manifestation of their rejection of nomadic incursions. One lesser-known detail of the wall's history is its use as a kind of internal boundary, even within China itself. While primarily facing north, certain sections of the wall, or smaller regional walls, were constructed to delineate administrative boundaries or to control the movement of people within the empire. For instance, some sections were built to separate agricultural lands from pastoral areas, or to control access to resource-rich regions, demonstrating the wall's adaptability beyond its primary military purpose. These internal barriers, though less famous, highlight the intricate ways in which the concept of walls was integrated into Chinese governance and land management. The wall's legacy also extended into the realm of popular culture and folklore. Legends abound of its construction, often involving supernatural elements or tales of immense human sacrifice. The story of Meng Jiangnu, whose tears are said to have caused a section of the wall to collapse, revealing the bones of her conscripted husband, is a poignant example. These stories, passed down through generations, underscore the human cost of its creation and the deep emotional connection people felt to this monumental structure. The wall became ingrained in the collective memory, a silent witness to centuries of triumph and tragedy. Even in periods of peace, the wall continued to serve its function as a border marker, regulating trade, migration, and cultural exchange. It wasn't always a site of conflict. Often it was a place of negotiation, diplomacy, and cautious interaction. The gates, while formidable, were also points of entry, allowing emissaries, merchants, and even curious travelers to pass, albeit under strict imperial scrutiny. The wall, therefore, was not an absolute barrier that completely isolated China from the outside world. Rather, it managed and controlled the flow of interaction, ensuring that contact occurred on terms favorable to the Chinese Empire. The enduring presence of the Great Wall has shaped China's geopolitical outlook for centuries. It ingrained a certain mindset, a perception of the northern frontier as a zone requiring constant vigilance and defense, even after its military utility diminished. Shed with the advent of modern warfare, the wall continued to symbolize China's enduring strength, resilience, and unique cultural heritage. It is a monument that speaks not just of battles fought and borders defended, but of a civilization's continuous effort to define itself, to protect its way of life, and to project its power onto the vast landscapes it calls home. In essence, the Great Wall became a living entity, evolving with the dynasties, adapting to new challenges, and accumulating layers of meaning over millennia. From its earliest earthen ramparts to its formidable Ming stone fortifications, it mirrored the aspirations, fears, and ingenuity of the Chinese people. It stood as a testament to their capacity for monumental collective effort, their strategic foresight, and their profound desire for order and security in a world often characterized by chaos. Its silent stones whisper stories not just of war, but of trade, identity, communication, and the enduring human need to draw lines in the sand, both physical and psychological, against the vast, often bewildering expanse of the unknown. As the centuries turned, the Great Wall, no longer solely a military bulwark, began to transform in the collective human imagination. Its role shifted from defense to symbol, from a barrier of stone and earth to an emblem of endurance, ingenuity, and the sheer scale of human endeavor. In the modern era, particularly from the late 20th century onward, the wall has been increasingly recognized not just as a Chinese marvel, but as a universal heritage. This recognition culminated in its inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987, a designation that formally acknowledged its outstanding universal value and placed it among the planet's most significant cultural treasures. This status brought with it a renewed focus on preservation, moving beyond the localized efforts of earlier decades to a more coordinated international approach to protect its vast and varied sections. Yet, even as its physical preservation gained momentum, the wall also became fertile ground for myth and legend, some rooted in ancient whispers, others born of more recent romanticism. Perhaps the most pervasive and enduring myth is the claim that the Great Wall is the only man-made structure visible from space with the naked eye. This notion, often repeated in popular culture and even in some educational materials, has no basis in fact. From the low Earth orbit of the International Space Station, roughly 250 miles above the planet. Discerning even large structures like highways or cities requires specific lighting conditions and keen eyesight, let alone a structure as narrow as the wall, which averages only about 20 feet in width. Astronauts and scientists alike have repeatedly debunked this myth, explaining that while some sections might be faintly discernible under ideal conditions, it is far less visible than, for instance, the bright lights of major cities at night. This enduring misconception, however, speaks to the profound awe and almost mystical status the wall holds in the global consciousness, a testament to its perceived monumental scale. Another fascinating, though less widespread, modern myth concerns the supposed use of human bones in the wall's mortar. This grim legend, sometimes whispered in hushed tones by local guides, suggests that the bodies of deceased laborers were incorporated into the construction materials to strengthen the wall or to consecrate its foundations. While it is undeniably true that countless laborers perished during the wall's construction, from exhaustion, disease, and harsh conditions, archaeological and chemical analyses of the wall's mortar have consistently shown no evidence of human remains. The primary binding agent used throughout most of the wall's history was a mixture of slaked lime and sticky rice flour, a remarkably strong and durable compound that explains the wall's incredible longevity. The origins of this particular myth are unclear, but it may have arisen from the very real human cost of the wall's creation, a way to convey the immense sacrifice and suffering involved without literal accuracy. The wall's modern legacy also encompasses its role in international diplomacy and cultural exchange. Since the opening of China to the world in the latter half of the 20th century, the Great Wall has become a primary destination for foreign dignitaries and tourists, a symbolic backdrop for diplomatic visits, and a powerful visual representation of China's long history and cultural depth. Leaders from around the globe have walked its ancient stones. From Richard Nixon in 1972, a visit that marked a pivotal moment in U.S.-China relations, to countless heads of state and international figures thereafter. These moments, captured by cameras and broadcast worldwide, further cemented the wall's status as a global icon, transcending its original military purpose to become a bridge for understanding and connection. Yet, despite its global recognition and the efforts to preserve it, the Great Wall faces ongoing challenge. In the modern era, erosion, both natural and human-induced, continues to threaten sections of the wall. Vandalism, though less prevalent than in earlier decades, still occurs in remote areas. Perhaps the most significant challenge is balancing the immense tourist interest with the need for conservation. Millions visit the wall each year, primarily at well-developed sections like Badaling, Mutianyu, and Jinshanling. While tourism provides revenue for maintenance and local economies, the sheer volume of visitors puts stress on the ancient structures. Authorities grapple with questions of access, sustainable tourism practices, and the delicate balance between allowing people to experience this wonder and ensuring its longevity for future generations. For instance, the debate over whether to restore crumbling sections to their original appearance or to preserve them as they are, showcasing their age and natural decay, continues among preservationists. Some argue for minimal intervention, allowing nature to reclaim parts of the wall as a testament to its vast history, while others advocate for more extensive restoration to maintain its perceived grandeur and structural integrity for visitors. The Great Wall's narrative is also deeply woven into China's national identity. It is a source of immense pride, a tangible link to a glorious and complex past. In textbooks and national discourse, it represents resilience, unity, and the collective spirit of the Chinese people. It is a symbol of strength and continuity, a physical manifestation of a civilization that has endured for millennia. This profound cultural significance means that the wall is not merely a collection of bricks and stones, but a living monument, constantly reinterpreted and celebrated in art, literature, and popular culture. From historical dramas to modern video games, the wall continues to inspire and captivate, serving as both a historical landmark and a powerful narrative device. The very concept of the Great Wall itself is a modern construct, a simplification of a complex reality. As historians and archaeologists delve deeper, they increasingly emphasize that there isn't a single continuous Great Wall, but rather a vast network of walls, fortifications, trenches, and natural barriers built over more than 2 millennia by various dynasties and regional states. The unified image of the Great Wall, particularly the iconic Ming Dynasty sections, gained prominence in the 20th century, largely through Western perception and later adopted and promoted within China. This nuanced understanding challenges the monolithic image, revealing a more intricate and dynamic history of border defense and territorial control. It highlights the shifting priorities of different rulers, the diverse building techniques employed across various regions, and the constant evolution of defensive strategies in response to changing threats. Even today, new discoveries related to the wall are being made. Archaeological surveys, often utilizing satellite imagery and drone technology, continue to uncover previously unrecorded sections of wall, watchtowers, and associated garrisons in remote areas, particularly in the western deserts and mountainous regions. These discoveries not only extend the known length of the wall system, but also provide invaluable insights into the daily lives of the soldiers and laborers, the logistics of construction in challenging environments, and the subtle variations in architectural styles and materials across different periods and terrains. These ongoing explorations underscore that even a structure as seemingly well-known as the Great Wall still holds secrets waiting to be unveiled by modern scholarship and technology. The Great Wall, therefore, stands as a testament not only to ancient engineering and imperial ambition, but also to the enduring power of human narrative. It is a physical monument that has transcended its original purpose to become a global symbol, a subject of both factual inquiry and persistent myth. Its story continues to unfold, shaped by ongoing archaeological research, the challenges of modern preservation, and the ever-evolving interpretations of its place in history and the human imagination.